My ex-boyfriend lived in a very old part of town, in a house that was built in the 1800s. At one time, the home had been a stately and elegant one, with a long and gracefully curving stair as the focal point upon the entrance into the foyer. Through time, and with the coming of rough economic periods, the home grew into disrepair and was eventually sectioned off into a two-family home. One side housed a family of bikers, whose moonshine sent many a folk into orbit. We didn't have any moonshine the night this happened. And in the other lived my boyfriend and his roommate. One night, myself, my boyfriend Nick, Nick's friend Dave, and my friend Stacy, who was dating Dave at the time, were at the house. We were descending the grand staircase I mentioned earlier, on our way out to enjoy our Saturday night. All was dark, except for the soft lighting coming from the kitchen, which was illuminating the front doorway. On the front door, we saw the unmistakable silhouette of a woman in a long old-fashioned hoop skirt, like women wore in the 1800s. She scared the wits out of me and Stacy, and we both refused to go any further down the stairs until the rest of the lights were put on. Chickens, aren't we? Although Nick and Dave were in a position to see the woman's shadow, for some strange reason, they were unable to see her. Maybe she only liked women, but I know this for a fact. The next moment we actually saw the woman, it looked as if we saw her with her eyes gouged out, and she was running towards us, flying down the hallway. It was actually pretty creepy, but it happened in the corner of my eye, so I don't know if I was hallucinating or I actually saw her full steam ahead, but it definitely creeped me out. Another moment. My friend Stacy was upstairs, and the door was completely wide open, the bathroom door that is, and she saw that same woman in Victorian era clothes just laying in the bathtub with, again, her eyes gouged out. I honestly don't understand what happened to this woman. At first I thought it was pretty innocuous, but now I understand. She must have been murdered. There's no other explanation I had than that. Thanks for reading, and I hope you enjoyed the story. I've always been hesitant to talk about this story, but what I tell you is true. In 1992, when I was separated from my wife for the first time, I was living at Old Farm in an apartment. One Saturday night, when my kids were off to their grandmother's and my girlfriend, who was a teacher, had an event to attend, I found myself in my apartment, all alone. I rented a couple of movies, ordered a Pizza Hut, went on over to the whirlpool for a while, and sat down to enjoy a peaceful night, alone at last. I was really looking forward to a night by myself. When I was reading in bed, I noticed a black silhouetted figure standing in my bedroom door. The figure appeared to have a cloak drawn over its head. I couldn't recognize any features, nor was there any attempt to verbally communicate. I was wide awake, and I was terrified. My heart was racing, and I kept pulling the covers over my head. It seemed like every second was one of terror. The figure stood in my doorway, well into the morning hours, and I knew my eyes were as big as they could get. When the silhouette disappeared, I was covered with sweat. My hair was rain wet. I rushed out to the front room because I really couldn't believe it had left me. No, the only thing I had to drink was a Diet Coke with popcorn. I'm not a big drinker. After the ordeal, I quickly showered and raced off to go hiking. I can honestly tell you that no communication with the figure was made. When I would ask who you are, there was no response. This went on all night, until by the grace of God, it went away, This event has always affected my life. I know of another person who had a similar experience like mine. Can you tell me what was standing in my door, why there was no communication, and why me? Have you ever had any stories like this reported to you? Until now, the only person I ever told this story to was a good friend who is a Catholic priest. It still scares me to tell this story. Why was there no attempt to communicate? And yes, when I checked my doors, they were all bolted and locked. My father loved the state of Maine. Not enough, however, to give up his cush job in Boston to live on the going wage of a Downeaster. So every summer, from the mid-50s until I reached high school, we would vacation on the scenic Maine coast. Very seldom will we stay in the same place twice. Usually, it was some remote cottage located on the outskirts of some tiny coastal town. A 2-week ordeal was in store for me, with no TV or friends to speak of. To keep me sane, my mother would buy me comic books and play board games with me, long into the night. We'd been at this cottage now for about 10 days, and I was counting the hours until we would leave. It was a chilly August night, and dear old Dad had a few too many and drifted off to bed. Our terrier, Joe, was snoozing on the carpet in front of the fireplace, and through the big picture window, the surf was something out of a South Pacific movie. The waves were gently breaking on the rocky shore, not 20 yards from the cottage. The only sound was the reverie coming from a cruise ship that was passing off the point. In summary, the night was calm. Suddenly, Joe jumped to his feet with his hackles up and growled at the door. I yelled at the dog to be quiet as he interrupted me over a card game. In an instant, the front door blew open, and with a bang, it hit the interior wall. Just then, a ghostly presence entered through the doorway. He looked as if he was from the colonial era, had a musket in his hand, and seemed as though only half his face was visible, even though the figure itself had a blur to it. This lasted a few seconds, then the figure disappeared, like a fog that evaporated. Joe cowered, and my mother's hair moved, like it had been ruffled by some invisible breeze. The playing cards scattered about, and before we could take a breath, the door slammed shut, and Joe went back to his sleeping position. We decided not to tell the old man, as he wouldn't believe it anyway. A few days later, we were filling up the old Plymouth for the return trip to Boston, and my father started gabbing with the local about his vacation. With the windows of the car down, we heard every word. So where did you stay? The man asked, with the Maine dialect. Oh, down on the point at the Jensen cottage, my old man answered. Folks around here know that place well, the man said flatly. They refer to it as the front door. My name is John. I'm 41 years of age and currently live in the city of Lincoln, England. During my life to date, I've seen several ghosts, and whilst I still find them surprising and of course fascinating, I'm no longer afraid of whatever they are or appear to be. I saw my first ghost at around the age of 8 whilst having in my childhood home, a large Victorian house on the edge of Manchester, England. The ghost was one of a young boy of a similar age to mine at the time. He was leaning over the banister rail of the stairway landing outside my bedroom as I was making my way up to bed. The shock and surprise of seeing him sent me flying downstairs into the front room of my house. Needless to say, that none of my family appeared to believe what I told them I had seen. Although over the years, I've experienced strong sensations of ghostly presences. My next positive encounter was not until I was 22, whilst living and working in the city of Newcastle. I'd obtained the keys to a vacant industrial building, which my firm was taking over. My job was to assess the work involved in converting the building for its future use. I'd locked myself in the building and was therefore sure that no other person was on the premises, and was proceeding up some steep and narrow stairs when I felt a hand touch me on the top of my head and give my hair a friendly ruffle, rather like an affectionate parent may give their child. I immediately turned around, only to find the stairway completely empty. Surprised, but not afraid this time, I continued my inspection of the building. We moved into the premises, and although I had my office at the top of the stairs where I had my encounter, and worked there often late into the night, I never saw, heard, or felt anything unusual there again. My next encounter took place right here in Lincoln, about 3 years ago. Walking our dog out late one night, I noticed the cyclist approaching me along a side street. I thought the cyclist appeared a little unusual, insofar as he was riding an old-style, sit-em-up-and-beg cycle. His hair looked rather old-fashioned too, and most curiously of all, he appeared to be wearing an old-style Royal Air Force uniform. I could see the streetlight reflecting off the silver buttons on his uniform tonic, and from the chrome handlebars of his cycle. He got to within about 30 yards of me, when for some reason I glanced down for a second. When I looked up again, he had completely disappeared from the street, and there was no way in which he could have left the street in the vicinity of where I last saw him. I wonder whether his appearance was, in some way, connected to the fact that there used to be an open-air swimming pool adjacent to where I saw him. This pool is very popular with air crews during World War II, and I can only assume he may have been on his way for a midnight swim. My most recent encounter was very brief, occurring during the first time I visited my mother's cottage in North Wales. Built around 200 years ago, the back room opens directly out into the rear garden, with the narrow stairs descending into the back room right beside the back door to the building. Whilst coming down the stairs, I saw an elderly woman walk through the back door and disappear. She was aged about 80, approximately 5 foot tall, wearing a gray dress with long sleeves, a white apron, and her straight gray hair was tied up in a sort of bun, which in turn was covered by a small handkerchief on the top of her head. She was followed immediately by a young girl, aged about 10 or 12, dressed in a long light, colored smock. Her hair was very long, blonde and straight, falling down her back. She also disappeared straight away. I've no idea what ghosts are, or why they appear. I do not see them as threatening. In fact, on more than one occasion, a curious sensation of contentment seems to fill the air after they have gone. I've noticed that my mind is not thinking about anything in particular at the times I've come across them. Thanks for reading. I grew up in Western New York and knew the local legends of ghosts. The Rochester Durant White Lady, for example. I never really put much faith in them. I never had an experience until I left New York. In October of '99, I was transferred to Elyria, Ohio. After a few weeks, I was asked to work in Sandusky. I accepted the promotion, but having just settled into a new apartment, I decided to commute rather than move again. Halfway between Elyria and Sandusky, there was a rest stop on I-90, Route 2, just outside Vermilion. I would stop sometimes on the way home for a bathroom break or rest a bit. It's a funny design. You drive around and park in back of the building, between the building and wooden walking trails. I usually got off work after about 11 p.m., but it was usually pretty busy, so I never gave much thought to stopping there late at night. One night, in March of this year, I'd stopped for a bathroom break. I noticed that there was only a few cars in the lot. It was a warm spring night. I wondered why more people weren't out. As I returned to my car, I had this urge to walk into the wooded area. A stupid thing to do, as it would be easy for a human assailant to hide on the trails. I walked in about 10 feet, and the path split to the left and straight ahead. I walked a little further straight ahead and felt something in there with me. I turned and started to walk out when I heard a noise, kind of like a lumbering sound. Feeling foolish and thinking there was probably an animal, like a hedgehog or deer, walking through the woods, I looked back and saw a pair of yellow eyes on the path quite a whiles back. I knew it could not be an animal, as only the parking area was lighted. The only light in the woods came from the ambient light and the moon. I quickly closed the distance between myself and the parking area, keys in hand. To my relief, nothing pursued me, and the eyes were gone, or at least, I couldn't see them anymore. I went straight home. The next day, I felt rather silly. Thinking about the matter during the day, none of it seemed like it should have scared me. I rationalized the whole thing. That night, I stopped for a bathroom break. Feeling brave, I decided to once again check out the woods and dispel my fear once and for all. This time, I walked out only halfway to the fork, and I felt an overwhelming sense of dread. I was not afraid in the usual sense, rapid heartbeat, sweating, etc. I just had this feeling of not being able to walk any deeper into the woods. It was like the air got heavier the further I walked. As I walked out of the woods, the feeling went away, just as it had come. I decided to come back on my day off and investigate, during the day. I'd never been in the day, and I didn't know where the trails led, or what was in the woods that attracted people to them. I returned a few days later with my jogging shoes, ready to explore. The trails wrapped around to each other and only totaled a mile loop. There was a ledge, a cliff area, but it was fenced off and there was no way to get down, but I could see a stream in the distance. I didn't feel anything strange at all. Nonetheless, I made it a point not to stop there after dark. A few months later, I was transferred to Newcastle, Pennsylvania, which leads me to my next story. But we are still looking into it, and it's AM now, so I need some sleep. I don't usually share this with anyone, since most people would consider me crazy for believing in this stuff, my husband and father included. When I was about 2 years old, back in 1973, I have very vivid memories about my childhood, and my mother confirms my memories. We rented an old house, about 100 years old. It was there when in Phoenix, Arizona. It was not much, but a lot of farmland. There was a smaller house next to it that used to be the old barn. It's still there today, but surrounded by huge mansions. Anyway, things were peaceful there until our next door neighbor hung himself in the kitchen and my father found him. I never knew about it. But about 3 months after, things began to happen. My mother was having an argument with my father one morning before getting out of bed. She got really mad and got up and went to the kitchen. She saw a man sitting at the table with his head in his hands on the table so that she couldn't see his face. She turned around and went back to bed not saying a word to my dad. Later, I began to see a hand floating in my room and would hear it talk to me. I called it, and this is kinda weird, bugs, but now I think it could have been about avid bugs or something about that. As a child that young, it was difficult to express myself with words yet. I didn't have the word for ghost and would be spanked by my father for crying at night when this thing would appear and talk to me. One time, I was sitting on the potty with my mom there to supervise. I couldn't get off the toilet, like something was holding me down. My mother was pulling me by the arms to try to get me off, but couldn't. Finally, it let go. Sometimes, the door was slammed shut and locked with me on the other side, and I couldn't get out. Only the lock on the other door didn't work anymore. No matter how hard my mother would pull, the door would not open. Then all of a sudden, it would feel as if nothing happened. At night, you could hear scratching noises under the wood floor in the master bedroom. Dad said it was just animals. He crawled under the house, but didn't find anything. He never believes in this stuff. At night, when I would go to bed, always fussed about not wanting to go because I was scared. Before falling asleep, I felt something was trying to pull me through the wall. Sometimes, I felt like I was floating, like in another dimension or something. My mother finally had enough and made my dad find a new house to buy. We moved, and nothing quite as dramatic as that ever happened to me again. The new house had its little incidents, but that's another story. My parents are still alive in the house, and they bought it 27 years ago. In a new family adventure you've never seen in quite a while, Phantom of Darkness takes you on a journey through multiple stories of narrations, and you listen to it. Phantom of Darkness presents True Scary Ghost Stories, coming to you right now. Except if you're probably listening to this right now, you probably listen to this. So comment, like, share, and subscribe. Really make sure you share this video around, because if it wasn't for me, nothing would happen, because I am Ego Man. Ego Man, let go of my ego. I'm leaving it on the ground. You guys can have it. I don't want my ego. Okay, just completely disregard what I just said. Guys, thank you so much for tuning into this great True Scary Stories story version of narrations. I'm really messing up what I'm saying, guys, but it doesn't really matter because I never make any sense, as you guys know. But I'm really positive that I like this video, and if you like it, you'll get $1. Maybe not, because I want to have some money. Because if I gave everybody $1, I'd be $20,000 in the hole. Maybe. I don't even know my math skills, so I have no idea what I'm saying. But guys, seriously, thank you so much. I really encourage you guys to like, comment, share, and subscribe. It really means so much to me. I'm not going to edit anything out. I'm kind of tired, but you guys know that I really love you. So with that being said, I'm going to vroom out of here and just leave. So love you guys, and see you in the next video. Tell me which story you love the most. I like the last story a lot. I think so anyway. I gotta look over these stories, but for now it's the last story. But meet me in the comment section, guys. I love you.